Right. My name is Ojas. I'm an urban practitioner for the last 10 years. Thank you, Vinayak and Nitya, for having me here. I saw the film for the first time a couple of days ago, and I really like how the fictional element sort of is the hook for the larger story, right? For those of you who missed the beginning, I know some of you came later. We have a character who drops her watch down the toilet. Okay, she flushes it down accidentally, right? And there's a story behind the watch. The watch is an HMT watch. HMT is made in Bangalore. It's one of Bangalore's old PSU era like institutions that used to manufacture watches, and it's a hand-me-down from a character called Deepak, who happens to be Nitya's father, right? Who bought that watch, I don't know, in the 80s, in the 90s, 70s. Yeah. And then passes it down to his fictional son, who then proposes to his girlfriend, who's the character you see in frame, with the watch, right? But then she accidentally ends up flushing it down, and then begins the inquiry into what exactly happens with the sewage system. And from the sewage system, we go into the drainage system. And towards the end, you have an idea that the city is not just by itself an overall system, but it's also a collection of these other systems that are always circulating, right? Sewerage is generated and circulated. Drainage, stormwater, rain is circulated. Water, Bangalore, you saw in the documentary, is 900 meters above sea level, right? It's like 95% of India lives below Bangalore. Right, so to pump water from Kaveri, you have to actually pump it from down to so it takes a lot of energy, right? So there's the water system, and then there's traffic which is also circulating, which is your most commonly, visibly annoying system that's in your face, right? And from the inquiry, you also, I really like the way the coverage of people in the value chain, people at the treatment plant, people at BWSSB, contractors who work with BWSSB, actual sanitation workers who clean your drains, right? All of them come together to tell this larger story of a fragmented governance systems with multiple sort of jurisdictions playing together and somewhere creating, some success stories by, cleaning 80% of your stormwater, sewerage water which is recycled. And some sort of not so much success stories. I don't know if you all are familiar with, in 2008 near Kaveri Cinema, they tried to build an underpass. The underpass exists now because 2008 the new airport had just been set up. And they built the underpass first on Bellary Road, and in the process they broke old sewerage and drainage lines that the British had set up. Right? So in the process of that construction, that entire area is flooded. Sewerage is on the road, water is on the road, and then they said, okay, we'll move the underpass from this road to this road. It is practically useless, that underpass. Buses have to come like this and take a U-turn on a very tight corner, but they're like, we set out to build an underpass, so we built out an underpass. So there you got an idea that, Bangalore also from BMC became BBM, from BMP became BBMP in 2008. Right, it expanded its boundaries, but that's when you begin to realize that a lot of the systems that make the city running, even the people running the city don't have clarity on it. A lot of our old sewerage maps are lost, a lot of our old drainage maps are lost. Now, okay, like Karnataka state government's GIS department has put together, I saw one map of the drainage system that's there, right?
But that's a pretty old one.
That's an old one also, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of these information gaps and a lot of these characters coming together. And there's, at the end, a sort of a call to action, like what can you do about it? There is some responsibility of the individual as well as organizations. And there is some reference to discrimination and harassment that happens, but is not entirely explored, right? But yeah, first I'll just like to begin, congratulations on making this film.
Thank you. And thanks for that summary, Ojas.
First I'd just like to begin with what led you down this path. Did you actually drop a watch down the toilet?
Thankfully not,
Okay.
no. Has anyone flushed anything accidentally down the toilet? Anything precious? Nobody. Oh, what have you flushed? That's a common one apparently. A big? The whole towel went in, and this is what they were complaining about at the STP. Yeah, people like you. So this was a project commissioned by Science Gallery, Bengaluru. They are based in Sanjay Nagar. This was for their film festival called Sci 560, which is about science in Bangalore. and stories about Bangalore. So this project was a part of that festival. I set off initially to do a film about water, which is a really large and vast concept, because I was curious about the story. You know, what's the story of how water comes to Bangalore? Like you'd mentioned, Ojas, it gets pumped 200 kilometers away. That's a lot of engineering and a lot of power that goes into pumping water into Bangalore. But eventually, to narrow that down, it came down to this question of, which is something I had not thought about before making this film, is what happens to water after, like what's the story of water after it leaves your toilet? And yeah, that's just how it came about.
Okay. The title Down the Drain evokes both a literal and has both literal and metaphorical connotations, right? There's loss, waste, and invisibility. Now, what were you trying to reclaim or reveal through this film that often goes down the drain in the public consciousness? Right? Other than obviously the materials like earrings and watches, right? Yeah. Is there like a larger thing you were trying to uncover?
Yes, I think making this film was also a process for me of learning more about my city, but largely looking at something that I had looked away from all my life, which is something that nobody really wants to look at, which is waste. Once you dispose waste, once you flush your toilet, once it's out of your house, it's not your problem anymore, out of sight, out of mind, and I'd never actively thought about it. Right. And I think that is something that becomes invisible to most people, right? Waste is, it's either underground, it's just something, it's not your problem anymore. Right. So I think bringing that to light was a part of, one of the intentions of, I mean, I think the word invisible is a nice word to use, because it is something that you wish it was, like you don't want to deal with it. Right? The process is invisible. Unfortunately, you see it constantly around you, even though you're not supposed to, but I think we have a way of kind of putting the blinders on so we don't have to ever think about it because someone else is handling it, it's not our problem.
Yeah, okay, so that brings me to like a very obvious question where when you say waste is something that you don't want to think about, right? That's because in the evolution of Indian society, you have class and caste-based segregations, which means that handling waste has historically been the job of certain caste groups.
Yeah, and
who
I
are
think
sort of
who are marginalized, and I think that ties in very strongly with why we don't have to look at waste, because I think for most of us it doesn't feel like our job or our duty to deal with waste. There is someone whose duty it is, and it's not ours. That is the perception that is there. And you're right, Ojas, when you said that the theme of discrimination and of casteism is underexplored in this film. But those are also constraints of duration, like 20 minutes, and trying to show an entire system. Yeah. I think it's a topic that, deserves an entirely, like a film of its own, because there's a lot to say about it. Yeah.
I would say, okay, in documentary filmmaking, there's always a tension between representing reality and shaping a narrative. Right? There is the infrastructural reality, but then there's also the social and cultural reality. There's some more references to that in the fact that people talk about how it's your responsibility to not throw things in the moris, right? Not discard waste, right? Your liberal society, upper class individuals would obviously claim that we live in respectable societies and obviously don't do this. And the fault always falls upon slum dwellers or people in informal settlements, right? So there's those levels which are playing together, right? So how did you navigate, like, whose voices were foregrounded and whose remained in the margins? Like I said, there's some things which are unexplored, even though touched upon, and some things which are prioritized. Is there any particular reason?
Oh, I think just by also, by virtue of the fact that it's a short film, it's a 20-minute film, you do have to make these decisions. I think the question that you ask yourself when making a film, especially a film like this, is what are you trying to achieve and what are you trying to say? And
I guess my question is also that, like, essentially, what is the larger, is there an agenda? What is the larger sort of?
I think, like towards the end of the film, you do hear the protagonist say that I may have larger problems than the watch. I just didn't think of them as my problem before that. I think it was a sense of ownership that I wanted to evoke. Like, I'm hoping that once you watch the film, you go away thinking that okay, this is also my problem. And I personally, when I've seen a lot of films and a lot of content I have seen when it comes to environment or sustainability or climate or urban infrastructure, it's very, very depressing. It's very pessimistic. It's depressing. And it leaves you feeling hopeless when you leave.
Yeah.
Because you're looking at this, you're like, okay, everything's gone. No point in, may as well continue doing what you're doing. So I think trying to act from a sense of ownership feels a little more constructive than working from a place of guilt.
Yeah.
So I definitely didn't want to put in this like, oh, you're not doing enough, or you don't care enough, or I didn't want to come from a preachy place. So I think with the film, I'm trying to put in as much information to give a view of what this overall system is and what its parts are.
To foster some sense of ownership in the audience that views it.
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
Okay, so then, that brings me to another question. Ownership is slightly dangerous because in Bangalore's recent history, you'll notice that it's the migrants that are blamed for everything, right? They're the people who do your labor. They're also people who work in IT industry.
Yeah.
But they're blamed for the traffic. They're blamed for not being able to take ownership because they're all tenants, right? I don't know if anybody else faces, but the landlords in Bangalore are famous for, treating. So then this whole question of, is there even an ability to have ownership with city systems when you don't own property? Or is it only something that the propertied class in the city should care about?
Oh, that's a good question.
Right. Ownership goes on a dangerous path that way.
Yeah, I'm just thinking aloud, but I think that when you do stay in a place, and I don't know what that time period is when you're like, okay, I've, stayed this long, I should start caring now. But I think that you do, if you stay in a place, whether you own that property or not, if the street light outside your is not working, is that your problem or not? Do you have the means to make that work if water isn't coming in? I think those ideas also tie in with what ownership is.
Yeah.
So actually, I don't know how to answer your question, but it's a good question. I'll think about it. But also, I just wanted to, your previous question, you were saying that we have this perception that it's like, oh, we stay in these houses, we don't flush things down. What's been interesting with this film is I screened it at a couple of higher-end residential areas, residential communities, where a lot of places actually are not connected to the BWSSB line. They have their own sewage treatment plants within their
gated
residence.
Communities. Yeah. It's a requirement for
it's
new
now
constructions.
A requirement. And what's surprising is that you think that sensibility comes with economic, when you go higher up the economic scale, you're guessing that people are not flushing things down the toilet. But what was really surprising to hear is that even in these kind of communities, their STPs are full of diapers and sanitary napkins, and they're constantly, dealing with that kind of thing.
Yeah,
which was
you actually
surprising.
Find, there have been studies which have been done in many metropolitan cities which found that waste segregation happens much better in slum households than they do in gated community households. Yes, because collection process goes in such a way where you have separation at both the collector's truck as well as at the household. So that's very interesting. People who are likely to be penalized and suffer much more for that penalization are likely to follow regulations better. Right? Yeah. A lot of construction, even though it is within gated communities, builders may or may not sort of prioritize some sort of processes. And especially if it is outside the central system, like you said, certain gated communities have their own STPs, so they manage themselves but don't connect to the larger things, so they follow their own regulations. Right. And they face their own problems, right? Their machines keep malfunctioning and other things. Was there a moment during research or filming that fundamentally shifted how you understood the politics of urban infrastructure? Especially something as seemingly banal as drainage. Is there?
Yeah, I think, and what becomes interesting about making documentary is also you're kind of figuring it out as you're making it. You don't usually go in and say that this is what I'm going to shoot. You figure out a lot of it in the edit. So I think that whole whole process was a learning process for me. Every person you meet is contradicting the last person you spoke to.
Yeah.
So everyone has such a different view of what the world is, depending on, you know, whether they're a hydrologist or whether they're a professor who happens to be working with BWSSB, or, you know, you're talking to the sanitation workers who have a completely different perspective on the same system. So I think every conversation was constantly, it's just, you're like, okay, what's the truth? Like, what are we trying to get at here? Which is interesting. I mean, it's not one answer.
No, of course, But like the politics around all of this, right? The fact that there is institutional dynamics which clash with each other.
Yeah.
There's cultural and community connotations who have to do it because they have no choice and they're not respected. I found it very interesting that the person says that abroad an engineer and a drainage worker get paid the same amount. A doctor, so when pay parity comes, there will be respect.
Yeah, I think more than pay also, again, it ties in with casteism. Yeah. It's also, he's talking about the value, like the inherent value that human beings have, because a human being who is in one profession, just because of how our society is designed, has a lower value than someone who's at another profession. I mean, that's not supposed to be the case, but it is what the reality is. So yeah, I think in terms of, there are two levels, right, when you're looking at things like this. There's one is the systems, which is like the bigger overview, and you realize that there are a lot of problems. Yeah. And then you're also dealing with this there are social issues, and then
like systems aren't abstract, right? They're embodied in people with roles and responsibilities.
And you realize how all over the place that is, because just by looking at the sheer number of bodies that even govern something like a stormwater drain, it's like, I don't know what the number is, but it's a large number of
BBMP builds it, the water is collected by someone else.
BWSSB is responsible for the sewage that goes through it.
There's a sewerage board which manages the treatment plants which are contracted outside.
It's a large
there's independent monitoring bodies.
Yes.
I think it's a really nice ploy because everybody gets to blame each other when something goes wrong and not take responsibility.
I think that's a lot of what happens, unfortunately.
Precisely, right? Like it's so complicated that nobody would bother to unpack what is really happening. I also found there's so apart from the complications given this fragmented nature of governance, the infrastructural deficits that are happen, cracks that happen, water that comes up, floods that happen, all of those things, and the discrimination layer that operates within these fields. Despite all of that, there's engineers, there's activists, there's architects, everyone who wants change, right? Towards the end, there's a normative call to say that we have to find a way to arrive at, some sort of way of working together or solving this. Bangalore has been celebrated as the Silicon Valley of the country, right? It is where tech innovation and solutions come together. And despite this want being there for the last 3-4 decades, what exactly is the challenge? Why haven't they been able to... What came from your interlocutors?
I think one is definitely the population, which is something that a lot of them talk about in the film, which is, it's always a catch-up game. The last census was done in 2011. There hasn't been a census done since 2011. And even census isn't an accurate representation.
And census is a national level, this thing. You need a city system survey, right?
Yeah, I mean, you don't know how many people you're actually designing for. And then when you design for those people, the population has already jumped. So I think the forecasting of, I think that is a problem. But Ojas, you should, I mean, for those of you who have not seen Benga Walk's content, I really urge you to watch it because I think it's explained really beautifully. It's available on YouTube. But the problems why Bangalore is struggling and why a lot of things haven't really worked out, I think you've explained it. You and Prabhat have explained it really well.
No, I was curious to say what each of the people you interviewed, had to say about the challenges they face to actually solve this.
Solve it.
Like your treatment plant people would have something. Mott Foundation would have had something.
Yeah, and I think
sanitation workers would have their own sort of.
Of course, and I think it's hard to make sense of it because there are so many players everyone coming from with their own perspective. So the problem that they're seeing is also unique. I don't think, I don't think that there's a one solution to everything, because everyone's problem is so defined, by their experience. Yeah. But also, I mean, I know what you're saying about the call to action, like let's all come together and make a change. I'm hoping with this film, and it's also something that, I was thinking about through the making of this film. I think that what we can do is just ask for better as citizens. Are we holding our government?
5 years, no BBMP elections. Now BBMP doesn't even exist. Now there's a Greater Bengaluru Authority where the CM is your mayor. So you have to wait till state elections to ask, so what is your opportunity? Or, of course, they'll keep gerrymandering till, now next election again BJP will come. That shift they'll undo the projects. Like, it's a cycle of...
Okay, then let me ask you, Ojas, why do you do the work that you do? No, I'm actually curious, because it can't be easy to be living in this state of hopelessness.
I'm a hater. At the core of my being, I just like to shit on cities. No, I'm kidding. I think... there must be some hope. There is. I think the loss of Bangalore is a very interesting sort of story, right? Before the 70s, it was your garden city. There were so many gardens. It was pensioners' paradise. So you'll see a lot of military settlements and layouts built for that. HMT was there, HAL was there. There were other PSUs. They built layouts. BDA was supposed to be your master planning authority, but they said, we'll just build layouts, sell this land, make money. Okay, that became their focus rather than the planning. So I feel there's been a disservice to the city in its politics of changing government every 4 years. And despite that, only 53% of the city comes out to the vote. And they've been voting for, like some seats, they've been voting for the same candidate for 25 years. Right? So the voting population in Bangalore is under some sort of, it's been gaslit for so long that they believe the same individual candidates will solve their problems, right? So I feel like there's been a big disservice that's happened to the city and its residents. And I'm not talking about the landlords and the property owners. I'm talking about everyone on the street, right? Which needs to be spoken about beyond these large infrastructure, tunnel road type solutions, right? So that's why I do what I do. My interest is to tell human interest stories, as this was, right? It is trying to humanize an infrastructure story. Which brings me to your fictional element, like what led you to that? I found it very enjoyable to have that as the undercurrent. My favorite scene is when she's talking about maybe 1 kid, 2 kids, and you cut to real estate ads where there is husband, wife, 1 child, husband, wife, 3 children. I love that because that's everywhere right now, right? You tune the radio, half of it is real estate ads. Buy this, get this view, so close to the airport, like everything within clubhouse, school, college, your children can be with you till they turn 40, like that's the pitch essentially, right? So I found that very interesting. So like what led you to the fictional sort of way to anchor this story?
So it's such a heavy topic. It's a very depressing topic, sewage. And I think it's just a personal preference to keep things light. And I think especially when you're dealing with heavy topics, it helps to ease an audience into it. And I think that an emotional hook, a story like a watch, everyone has an HMT in their family, right? Like your parents, someone's uncle, like
yeah, in Bangalore, I'd imagine.
I don't think it's just a Bangalore thing. I think all over the country, HMT was like this so iconic. It's a household thing. So it just felt like a nice emotional hook to get into the story with, and it was just really funny that someone would flush something down the toilet. Also, I was also having a little bit of fun with the form because I didn't want to do the typical documentary where people are talking at you and telling you like, these are the problems, why aren't you doing anything?
Right.
So that's where I went.
Have the sanitation workers seen the film?
Yes.
What did they think?
They came for the first screening at VIC. So with the sanitation workers, their story, I know it is very underrepresented in this film. They were really happy. I think what happens is they just really need their stories to be told. And I think they were really happy about their stories being told. There's a lot more to say, of course.
Yeah, I mean, this is the forum. Like, this is outside the film, whatever. If
No,
there's
I'm
something...
saying there's a lot more of their story to be told. And I think that's, for them, it's not, they're not really thinking of it as sewage systems. For them, the battle is more about their terms of employment, because they're all contract workers. So they have none of the benefits that employees have. Yeah. So they have no pension, they have no holidays, they have no rights whatsoever. So their fight is that's their fight, you know. What they thought of the film was they liked the film. I mean, like they appreciated the fact that the story was being told to whatever small extent that it is. But yeah, I think there's a long way to go still, yeah.
All right, any questions from the audience? Anybody would like to comment and...
So the BWSSB's system is one part of Bangalore. Like if you look at a map, I mean,
so the most well-serviced system is the old BMP limits.
Yeah.
Everything outside of that, some parts they've taken over, some parts they've not.
So the second you get into your outer, like away from central part of Bangalore, you get into Whitefield and Sarjapur Road, and I mean, whichever direction you go, they are not connected to the BWSSB line. So they will probably have their own sewage treatment plants within those newer constructions. Yeah.
So yes, they're generating a lot more sewerage, but they're also managing it themselves rather than adding to the system. I mean, it's a complicated question, right? Because like, I don't know if there's a percentage to it, but I'm guessing about 30 to 40% of Bangalore is rental. And a lot of them are like long-term renters, right? There's a lease model where you pay X lakhs and you get the house for 3 or 4 years and then you build over. That's the primary model of renting, right? So there is sense of ownership there.
I mean, you also have a lot of the population, which is what Mod Foundation talks about, is also you have students, you have a large student population, you have a large worker population as well. Yeah. So that is, I mean,
so much construction is happening, you need labor,
exactly.
so much
there's a lot
systems are being set up, there's labor.
So in addition to, it's not just like, do you own a house or do you rent a house? There's also a large moving population.
So Bangalore is supposed to have something called ward committees, right? So each ward is supposed to have the ward's administrative officer, the ward's elected representative, 3 or 4 key citizens on a committee where you're supposed to meet once a month to discuss all of these issues in the ward. Now, BBMP elections hasn't happened in 5 years, so unfortunately, ward sabhas haven't met. But constitutionally, there is a system to manage some of this, or how to take ownership, or where to come together, right? But because of other processes at work, of state governments having more control over the city, the local government level of trust and operational efficiency has come down. So if ward sabhas and ward committees can come back up, then there is a potential to have conversations. Film like this can be shown and you can ask people what they can do in their own ward, right? At least do an estimate, get how much sewage is actually being generated, where it goes. Do some of these investigations yourself, then there is potential.
There's mass screenings, education institutions like trying to show it in colleges and schools, of which I've done a few of them. And and also with BWSSB, that's a bit of a chock-a-block communication stream, but it's, the hope is to be able to get policymakers also to watch the film. The nature of sewage has also changed over time, which is why maybe that some of these diseases are making a resurgence. But what the sewage system was designed for was household sewage, right? But now the kind of material we use, the kind of detergents we use, a lot of like restaurant waste, like everything's mixed up. There's no different zones for these things. There's a lot of mix of effluent also that happens. So we are dealing with a different thing. When it's not just how.
No, but I agree with what you're saying. It's a really good way to frame some of these things, because your STPs, right? Many of them have popped up next to a lake,
Yeah.
right? So it's within the lake compound. There's an STP.
I mean, that's the way it's intended to.
Right,
Yeah.
and then the same treated water is then used to water the plants in the
Yeah.
park around it, right? But that STP, this thing is not covered, right? It's still water.
yeah,
It
yeah.
collects for a long time. Residents is around. Mosquitoes come. Like there's a lot of in the system itself. There is still water accumulating, both in drainage and sewage management, right? Which leads to a health crisis. Right, so that's an angle to explore. It's a valid way to frame some of this
Yeah.
to have a higher, greater policy impact, maybe.
Right.
Right.
No, that makes sense, and thank you for that. That's.
Check out Bengawok's YouTube channel. No, but
As a filmmaker, I think the money is a really important part of it. Like, if there is no funding, it's very difficult to make this kind of work, like engaging stories. I think people may find it easier to go a fiction route when it comes to social issues. So when you look at films like, just at the top of my head, something like The Great Indian Kitchen, if you've seen it, like I think Malayalam cinema is doing it a lot. You take social issues and you make stories out of it. You're able to land this point through a story, through fiction. Maybe that feels like a more effective way to address some problems. Also, what happens when it comes to perhaps public funding or when it comes to social causes, I think a lot of it is that you have to preach something, right? Like if you have this, like even with public art, right? If you have the space to make public art, you have to be like wash your hands or something. You can't just have art for art's sake, right?
Wear a mask, wash your hands.
Yeah, which is
don't litter.
Yeah, which I think is undermining people's intelligence a little bit, because when you're seeing something that is more artistic, like what I'm trying to say is that there are ways to land points that are not just telling you on your face that, hey, please do this. So I think that might just be a mentality thing. I don't know, but Ojas, do you have something?
I would say city systems have evolved over the last 20 years or so to become fairly complex, and anybody working in the area ends up making explainers. This was also to an extent an explainer. A lot of Bengawok videos are to an extent an explainer. Right? When you have other political problems like the delay of elections and other ways to democratically engage being cut away, and on top of that very fragmented and distinct systems, most of the storytelling gets stuck there. So more than just the funding, I think it's also a question of access. Government officials cannot appear in front of camera without clearances. I'm sure there are some of those things you had to negotiate in the process. Right, so they're tied up because of other things. So there's also those kind of problems, right? And because they're all working in these siloed departments, they don't have clarity on what someone else is doing, right? So that also leads to like these gaps, right? So everybody that actually trying to do this kind of storytelling ends up doing some kind of explainer. As at least let me start there. I'll get to how to solution out of this later. But first, I need to understand what is creating this complexity, right?
Honestly, I think speaking to every interview was an aha moment. But I think the biggest thing was also that when you look at systems, like you were saying, just that it's people, right? It's
think embodied in people.
Yeah. So when you think of like government, you're like, oh, government, or I don't know, whatever. What's the image that comes to your mind? Some building, I guess. I don't know. But when you actually start meeting people, there are people behind systems. And I think what was interesting is when you're meeting people at STPs and you're meeting people who are working in the BBMP and all, everyone's working really hard. Like the people you're meeting, like on the ground, It's not from a lack of sincerity or something, which I think is a perception that I had because it wasn't something that I was exposed to before that. So I think that was a good learning, a discovery for me.
Yeah. And the film also touches upon the fact that like all of this growth happened 30 years ago, right? So we're playing catch up.
Yeah, that was
right.
A
so
big one.
That's the real, and so they're running around really trying to solve these problems, but encounter newer problems in the process, and then they have to address those. Anybody else? I think that's an unfair dichotomy to create in terms of how invested people are. If you're building a life in any city, you're invested in its systems to a certain extent. At least to the extent that mera drainage is getting properly cleared or not. Am I connected to the right authorities to solve like a lighting problem or a drainage problem or a blockage problem, right? Beyond that, you participate through your RWAs or your unions, right? Like the sanitation workers would have a union to at least try and get them the right equipment, right safety, these things, holidays, health treatment, all of those things. So there are different ways of participating. Labor comes and builds your city, People who work in construction sites, should it really be their burden to think about a city system like drainage, right? Should it be?
I don't know what we can, like as you as an individual. I think that's a systemic, that's a BWS.
I can say fund better equipment, gloves, masks, things that they need for work. Buy it with their own money, distribute it. Find other sanitation workers, they'll be part of a union, you'll get a sense of how many of them work a particular area. Get these equipments to them. In medical health emergencies, help them out. Right? Give them water in a glass, not a steel glass. I think there's micro aggressions that happen when these discriminations happen, and there are larger systemic issues. Both are places you can intervene. You'll have to find out yourself to a certain extent, find these individuals, and then invest in better equipment.
There's a filmmaker called Agnes Varda, whose work I really love. I think that's been a big influence also because of how she deals with very serious topics, but she has such a curious and lovely way of filming people with genuine curiosity and really connecting with the people that she's filming. So I think, I really love her work. I mean, I don't think we can. I don't think that's a thing beyond us.
Yeah, I mean, that's a larger question about community, organizing, getting together, do film screenings, have conversations, meet weekly, host
that's
potluck
a good one.
dinners.
She said turn it into a reel. I think that's a good one, yeah.
For higher engagement, but nothing beyond
20
that,
minutes
right?
and all is too much, yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Bangalore.
Thank you.